What's up, y'all? Gonna have another opinion by Bones. Tonight it's just by Bones because Doggo and Next Best Thing have done deserted me. Even closed the door on me. You can see one of them's peeking out. Hey, there he is. Look at there. He's not quite asleep. Anyway, so I'm gonna try to do a quick video, and I say try because you guys know how much I like to talk. We just shut down just inside New Mexico here on I-40 headed west, and so I want to do a short video on the difference between load boards versus direct. Again, this is just my opinion based on several years of experience. So with direct, obviously you cut out the middleman, you cut out the broker, and that means you can charge a little bit more per mile if you choose to, or you can give your customer the discounted rate as long as you're still getting a fair rate. Totally up to you, but you've got both options. So here's the problem that I see with direct customers, the way I like to run. And I guess this is really going to depend on your business model. If your goal is to be at home real often, say you have kids and they're still little or whatever, and you really want to spend a lot of time at home, then this may be a business model that works a lot better for you, trying to build direct customers. Forget the 30 grand a month. Just focus on building your business. So with direct customers, you're going to have a lot of deadhead because you're going to pick up at point A, take it to point B, and it's going to be very unlikely that at point B there's something for you to pick up to take back to point A or close to it, assuming you live near your initial pickup location. So you'll have, I'll give you an example. I hauled a car for a lady one time, took it out to Phoenix, Arizona. She liked the service. A couple months later, she called me up, said, hey, I've got another vehicle, I need it moved. This is back when I was still early on getting into car hauling, and I thought, hey, this is great. I want to be able to build a regular customer base. So I said, sure, I'll haul it. And I got the date from her that was probably 6 weeks in advance. So I thought, that's great. That gives me plenty of time to plan a route that will have me in Arizona when it's time for her car to go. Well, the problem was when it came time for me to head that direction, there wasn't hardly anything on the board that paid very well, but I'd made the commitment, so I found what I could and I headed to Arizona, already losing money. I had given her a fair rate for both of us for her one vehicle. I did quite a bit out of Arizona at that point. The market was usually halfway decent, so I really wasn't worried about being able to find a load. But what I hadn't learned yet was that the difference is I already had a dedicated route grabbing her vehicle. I had to take her vehicle, I believe it was somewhere up near Nebraska. If you ever tried to book a load from Phoenix, Arizona to Nebraska anywhere, it's challenging at best and nigh on impossible at times. So I ended up finding something that went, most of my load, seemed like some of it went to Denver, some of it went on up to Minnesota. I pieced something together. I kept my commitment. I delivered her car. She was happy, but I lost money both going to and from. And I thought, well, maybe that was just a fluke. Maybe it just bad luck. Tried it a couple more times over the next year or so and had basically the same experience every time. What I learned from that was the moment that I stop following the money and start following a route, I lose money. Now, when that may make sense for you is if you live in a metropolitan area or a really high population density area, maybe up in the Northeast or near some large cities that you might be able to go back and forth between, and you start building a customer base where there's a lot of vehicles moving back and forth. over time, you may be able to build enough of a route, enough of a customer base that you don't have a lot of deadhead miles and you have a decent rate for the miles that you are running. The idea is that when you're doing direct customers, you can make more money per mile when you cut out the brokers, because brokers are competing with each other, always trying to get their cars moved the fastest and get customers to move their vehicle with them. And of course, the cheaper the rate that you can offer to the customer, the more likely they are to book their vehicle with you as a broker. Problem is, that means you can't list it on the board for as much money, and with competition, the rates fluctuate with seasons, they fluctuate with political climate, with all sorts of things. And so the idea is that with direct customers, you can get a more steady rate per mile, possibly even a higher dollar per mile. And while the idea is good and it's basically correct, it only works if you have enough freight going both directions and you're not doing a lot of deadheading or partial loads. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's easy. I'll just find something on a load board to do my backhaul with. Well, here you're back to the same problem. You're trying to find a vehicle on a dedicated route rather than following the money, because you picked up your customer's vehicle and you took it from point A to point B, and now you're trying to find something on a load board on a very specific route. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. That's just the way it works. Whereas when you are gravy picking off of multiple load boards, you're always following the money. And when you follow the money, the route doesn't matter. It's the money that matters. Which means you're able to book the best paying freight on the board all the time, in theory. But by and large, it does work that way. If, let's just say you live in Houston, Texas, and your normal route that you like to run when you can find the freight goes to Denver, Colorado. And on this particular week, for some reason, you just don't see much. That's okay. You don't have a dedicated customer. You've got the philosophy of following the money and hauling what pays. So you simply change up your search until you find a good paying load going the direction you want to go. Or even if it's the direction you don't really want to go, you're still following the money. So my philosophy has almost always been follow the money and haul what pays, because that's how you make the best money per mile. That's how you stay loaded with decent freight. That's how you make money out here. And for those of you who like to see the country and don't like to drive the same road back and forth every day, it's great because you almost never run the same exact route when you're following the money. For those of you who do like the consistency, the security blanket, if you will, of always having things the same, then sometimes you can find routes that typically have quite a bit of freight moving both directions. Then you can start networking, trying to build a base of clients on that route, and eventually you might cut out the brokers, but you need to be careful with that. Read your contracts carefully, because a lot of times a broker will have in their contract that you can't compete with them. You can't steal their customer for X number of months or years or whatever it is. So read the fine print to make sure that you don't place yourself in legal jeopardy where that broker could turn around and sue you. Not every contract has that in it, but some do. So just make sure that you are doing your due diligence and carefully reading each contract. Over time, if you're in the right area, you can build a regular route. There are guys out there that have spent a lot of time doing that, and they're making fantastic money with their own customer base. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that there are a lot of hurdles or challenges to overcome initially to reach the point that you can do that, if that is the business model that you want to set up. Another challenge with it is that unless you have a customer that say they're a large dealer and they're moving a lot of freight on a regular basis, you may end up with hit or miss. So you've got a dealer that they buy 10 cars from an auction once a month, and it's fairly consistent, but it's not consistent enough that you can really plan your month around it. But you want that dedicated customer because you've got in your mind that that's the type of business you want to build. So when that customer doesn't have the freight that you want, then you're suddenly having to scratch around on a load board trying to find something put together, but not get too far away, because when your dedicated customer calls, you still need to be available. Or you need to have an understanding with your dedicated customer that you got to make a buck. You can't just sit around and be available at their beck and call. If you're in the area when they have a load, great. If you're not, pass it on to the next guy, put it out on the load board, whatever it takes, and then call you first the next time. If you've got that type of a flexible client, then that may work okay for you. But oftentimes what I've seen is it just ends up costing you more than it's worth, at least in the short term. Again, long term, you might be able to build something if that's the business model that you really, really want. So the advantage is that I see with working load boards is you are in total control of what you put on your trailer. You're not, when you have a dedicated client, you haul whatever they give you. You get to choose regions that you want to run in, if not direct routes. Like everybody that knows me knows I love it out west. So I like running the longer haul. So I'll often do East Coast to West Coast back and forth. Normally, on a good 7-car trailer, that's a $10,000 run. It's easy, it's clean, it's straight through. If you don't find a full load going all the way through, say you find 4 that are going all the way through and you're still looking for a couple more, but they're just not paying what you want, so you switch your search up a little bit and you go part way. So you go from Jersey, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania area, maybe to Chicago. And instead of getting a $1,500 car for that, you get a $700-800 car. Then from there, maybe you go to Montana with a $600 car, and then from Montana on over to Washington with another $400 car. You just made a lot more money on that deck space on your trailer by doing multiple units instead of just the one, but you also have more time involved. So you've got to look at it carefully and plan it out strategically so that it makes sense. But I've had a couple of $14,000 runs going cross country, but I did a couple hop, skips, and a jump with several of my deck spaces. I built the skeleton of my load with long haul going all the way through that paid really well, and then filled in the gaps with shorter runs so that in the long run that deck space ended up paying more money. Has to, in order to make it worth the extra stops, the extra liability of handling more units. Every time you load and unload a unit, you're looking at damage potential. Damage is expensive. It's a headache. That's another video we'll do down the road on how to handle damage claims. So you end up with better money in the long run, but you have to balance that with the liability of handling more units. So watch your load boards carefully. One advantage to running the longer haul is you have more time to put a good load together, or your dispatcher has more time. The more time a dispatcher has to watch the load board or boards and keep refreshing that search every 30 minutes or so, see what's popped up that's new, and when the better paying units pop up, grab it. Don't try to book the whole load in one sitting. It's almost never going to happen financially in your benefit. You need to determine your route based on the first couple of really good paying units. And then once you've decided that you're going to go from Pennsylvania to Washington, you book your first 1, 2, 3 good units, and then you just start watching the board over 2 or 3, 4 days time. Every time a good one pops up, you book it. That way when your driver arrives in the area, they've got a full load of all gravy picked units. So every one of them on there is premium. You get your load, you head west, dispatcher's repeating the process. So that by the time you get to Washington, they've already booked an entire load of premium paying vehicles. In a perfect world, that works every time, and it produces $30,000 a month loads for your average 7-car trailer. There's lots of variables, but that's just the basics of it. Economy going down, you may drop to 25 grand in a month. Economy goes up, I've seen over 40,000 on a 7-car trailer with a solo driver. So you just have to have a good strategy in the way that you're looking for and dispatching your loads. And you have to have a driver with the right mindset that they're going to follow the money and haul what pays. They're not going to be home every other weekend consistently. That needs to be flexible, and maybe they'll be home in a week and a half this time and 2.5 the next time. It varies. If your driver's not flexible on that, you end up with the same problem with the final leg of the trip going back home as you do with the direct loads where you have all the deadhead miles. Because if you don't have a pretty decent schedule worked out, so your dispatcher knows exactly what's going on, and you have one of those drivers that just says, hey, I need to be home this weekend, and it's Wednesday. Now the dispatcher is tied to a route, again, not following the money, because they have to find a load from where the driver is back to their house. Now the one caveat to that is if the driver just needs to stop by the house for a day or so, the dispatcher may be able to book a load that's going past and just leave the load sitting on the trailer. Try to build in a couple extra days, because it is so expensive to unload and reload your trailer when you do a full unload and then a full reload when you're gravy picking individual unit. When I say it's expensive, so for me, I live about halfway between Nashville and Chattanooga and Knoxville, right in that triangle in Tennessee. So it's usually not terribly difficult to find a decent load coming back into that area, but I'll come in from the West Coast and I may even start dropping in Memphis. Sometimes I'll find something from Memphis back closer to home that's worth the time, but usually it's only like a $300 car. And I hate $300 cars, but a $300 is the lowest I will even stop and drop my ramps for. I hear all this stuff about, well, it at least covers your fuel money. Yeah, that doesn't work so well. That's another topic. So I spend a lot of time going around to 6 or 7 different addresses, completely unloading my rig. Then I go home. When it's time for me to leave out, I have to go to another 6 or 7 different addresses all over again, rather than dropping and picking at the same time. Drop one here, pick one there, drop 2, pick another one. By the time I'm finally unloaded, I'm getting ready to load my last vehicle or 2, and I have a lot fewer miles and time invested on a rotating load like that than I do on a going home and going to be empty load. So, and that's going to be the same, doesn't really matter, I guess, whether that's a direct or load board. Anyway, so I like being in control of where I go and what my loads are. I like gravy picking. I like the variability of never really knowing where I'm going. Never know what the next load's going to be. Meeting new people, seeing the country. And even though I've driven every major highway in the nation at this point, almost, and a lot of the side roads. There's enough time between them that it's not like having to drive the same road every single day, same route all the time. And yes, you'll go to the same auctions, you'll go same dealers, you know, you say, hey, I've been here before. But it varies so much that for guys like me with my personality, I love that. I get tired of being up in the cold, and I'll try to find something going down into the south. You know, I can vary things up. I know I'm kind of rattling on there a bit, but anyway, I just wanted to throw out some ideas on the difference between direct versus load boards. There's a number of load boards out there. Central Dispatch is obviously the biggest. I've said this in other videos, but I'll throw it in here for if this is your first time watching. Central Dispatch is the equivalent of Walmart. The other load boards are more like Family Dollar, Dollar General, the little smaller convenience stores. There's nothing wrong with the smaller ones. They just don't have as much product. There's nothing wrong with the smaller load boards. They just don't have as many loads listed. And because of that, the likelihood of them having a load on the route you're running is slimmer. Doesn't mean it's not worth taking the time to look, but you can almost all the time keep multiple large trucks running with decent money, as long as your driver is reasonably fast and productive and efficient, to make money on a number of large trucks strictly off of Central Dispatch. I know you'll hear some guys, if you get on the forums, you'll hear some people that are griping and complaining about Central and saying they'd never work with Central and it's just horrible. And again, I've said this on other videos, but if this is your first time watching, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. But Central Dispatch does a fantastic job of connecting the broker with the transporter, and that is their job. If you have been able to log in, see a load, call a broker, and book it, Central Dispatch successfully did a good job. If there's a problem with the load, it's the broker's fault. They will not always list things correctly on Central. They will not always fill in the right line correctly, so the information on Central isn't displayed correctly. That is not Central's fault. That is the broker's fault for not doing their job, for being too lazy. Some brokers will intentionally list vehicles in the wrong area, especially if they're going to some very rural areas, small towns where they think, well, nobody's going to want to go there. So they'll list the vehicle in a larger city, hopefully close by, but I've had them hundreds of miles off. And so you'll call about it, and they'll say, yep, I'll send it right over. And when they send it over, it doesn't have, say, Nashville, Tennessee. It may have some little tiny town that's 200 miles from Nashville that you're actually going to. So if you don't check all of the critical information before you log in and accept it, you may very well end up with having accepted a load that's not what you thought it was going to be. Doesn't mean you can't get out of it, but you should check the pickup and delivery dates. I highly recommend you never accept a must deliver exactly on date. I like the deliver within 2 days of way of listing it on Central. That way you've got a little bit of flexibility for breakdowns. Like, I've got a tire leaking right now, I've got to get it fixed in the morning. That's going to be a little bit of delay. In another video, I'll show you what's been going on over the last few days. I ended up buying 2 tires this morning. So delays happen. You want a little bit of flexibility built into Central so that you're not locked into a signed contract that says you must be there exactly on. Doesn't mean you can't renegotiate that, but why should you have to if you simply make sure that when you're booking the load, you explain to them that your pickup and delivery time is an estimate. Now, there are times when there's a vehicle that has to be picked up at a very specific time, and if you can make it happen, that's fine. Do what you want to do with that. But by and large, try to make sure you've left some wiggle room for yourself so that you don't put yourself in a bind. There's a couple things you'll run into on Central quite often. You'll run into double brokered loads. What I mean by that, and this particular time using that term, is that you'll have a specific vehicle that's brokered by more than one broker. And one of them may say, we have a signed contract. Another one may not. Neither one of them may say that. If one of them does say they have a signed contract, it means normally that the other broker is basically a leech. They're trying to snatch that vehicle. So ethically, you should call the one that has a signed contract first. A lot of times the other one may have it listed a little bit higher though, so call whichever one you choose. But what I highly recommend you do if you're dispatching for yourself is if you see a vehicle that's listed by more than one, and I've seen I think up to 5 different brokers having the same vehicle on the board, I'll book the vehicle, I'll call the customer and make sure the vehicle is still there and available if they have not been contacted by another carrier. Once I know I've got that vehicle locked in, I will make sure the customer knows the name of the carrier that has the legal contract to come get them, and to let them know that if some other carrier calls, that they don't have the right to pick that vehicle up. Then I will call the other brokers and say, hey, I just wanted you to know this vehicle is not available anymore. You might want to take it off the board so you don't get a negative rating or a problem with one of your carriers because the vehicle is not available. And most of the time they'll thank you for it. Sometimes you'll run into, you'll call a listing on Central and it will say, the broker will tell you, oh, that vehicle's already been dispatched, yet it's still on Central. Right there, that tells you that they're not using Central to dispatch through. They're sending it via email or something, because Central automatically, when you book a vehicle and it gets sent through Central Dispatch to you, it removes it from the available load board and puts it over into your in file, your not signed file until you sign for it. So Central is a great program. It's the brokers that cause problems for transporters like me because of the way they do business, shoddy business, lazy business, dishonest business. So just understand that Central's great. It's the brokers that's the problem. Anyway, guys, I'm tired. It's been a long day. Like I said, short video, and I talk a lot. So I'm gonna get some sleep, get up and get my tire fixed in the morning, hit the road. Y'all have a good one.